All right, the 49ers have a day off from practice on Sunday. The assistant coaches, the position coaches, will be made available for us in the media. So maybe we'll have some information or just some thoughts and observations from those coaches later in the day. So, day off on Sunday, back at it on Monday. And this is probably the first. This is the biggest week of 49ers practice just because the Denver Broncos are coming to town. And the game is kind of secondary to, I believe, the practice that'll happen on Thursday when they're able to script things out. The starters will get a lot of controlled reps. So it'll be interesting to see for the first time that young 49ers defense going up against a what should be probably a vastly improved Denver Broncos offense, and also a really good Denver Broncos defense challenging the 49ers offense. But at this point, a lot of the news around the NFL is in relation to some of the people who are still out there as free agents, or maybe more appropriately, talking about the newsmakers, the guys who are under contracts to teams but who aren't happy. Recently, Terry McLaurin, he announces that he is seeking a trade from the Washington Commanders. Micah Parsons is unhappy, and he put out quite a detailed statement about his situation with the Dallas Cowboys. And so, of course, anytime that comes available, guys like Terry McLaurin, Micah Parsons, Trey Hendrickson, even Christian Wilkins, who the Las Vegas Raiders recently released. Anytime names are out there, the 49ers have been aggressive generally in going after some players, but I just don't see that they're in that position right now. I think the 49ers, the players that they have are the ones that they're going to have. They've added some veteran players here in the last week, even since the beginning of training camp, but I just don't know that any of those players will even sniff a spot on the 53-man roster. The wide receivers they brought in, Eli Apple, kind of had a rough day on Saturday. So I just don't know that the 49ers, especially where they are with their salary cap situation, they and actually in their roster situation too. But let's look at the two positions where there are guys available. Let's start off with wide receiver. I don't see the 49ers making a trade with Washington to acquire the rights to Terry McLaurin and then giving him that contract that he desires. In fact, I would say I think it's highly unlikely that either Terry McLaurin or Micah Parsons or Trey Hendrickson are traded at any point by their respective teams. There's a lot of posturing that goes on, and heck, even covering the 49ers for the past several years, think of the trade requests that just never materialized. It's all part of the negotiation process. But as far as the wide receivers go, I think the 49ers feel very good, or they have reason to feel very good about 7 wide receivers that are currently on their roster, on their 90-man roster. Now, granted, there are question marks about some of those guys. How much time is Brandon Ayuk going to miss? But Brandon Ayuk is out there on the practice field daily. He's with the wide receivers. He seems totally engaged. In fact, he's kind of running some routes on air, kind of half speed. And so I don't know exactly. 49ers have been very secretive about when they expect him back, but my guess would be that he would miss 5 games this season as he returns from that ACL injury. Juwan Jennings hasn't practiced now in a week due to a calf injury, and I have gotten some questions about Juwan Jennings and his calf situation, and if it might just be a calf situation and maybe more related to a hold in. However, and trust me, I've thought the same thing. But the way he left the practice field a week ago would lead me to believe that no, it's legitimate, that he would be out there practicing if he were healthy. So I don't think that that's a serious thing. But I don't know that we'll see Juwan Jennings practice very much or see him play in any of the exhibition games leading up to the regular season. So you have those 2 guys right now on the sideline, and also Jacob Cowing, who had a good offseason program. He hasn't been able to practice because of the hamstring injury. So if the 49ers, let's just kind of take Terry McLaurin off the table here. if the 49ers were to go out and get a Keenan Allen, an Amari Cooper, a Tyler Boyd, um, I would think that they would. I would think that they would want either of those guys. Let's just go with Keenan Allen. I mean, he had a very productive season last year. Cooper and Boyd, not so much. But Keenan Allen, 33 years old, had 70 catches for over 100 or over 700 yards, around 750, 7 touchdowns. That's a really good season. But I think if the 49ers, if you're just looking at, let's say, mid-season on, if they have Ayuk, Jennings, Pearsall, Robinson, Jordan Watkins, I think that's pretty good considering Demarcus Robinson was a 17-game starter for the Rams last year. I mean, it's not fantastic. It's not the best wide receiving core in the league, nor is it top 10, but I think it's very workable, especially when you factor in Christian McCaffrey's part of that offense, as is George Kittle. And then the other guys that I think, like Russell Gage is somebody I've talked a lot about. I think I think Gage, Robinson, and Pearsall, when he's been on the field, have been the 49ers' best three receivers. In fact, if you saw my video yesterday, Ricky Pearsall looked outstanding. 5 passes thrown his way, 5 catches, including a couple of long ones early in practice that would have gone for big, big gains. One in which he caught it from Purdy, kind of sprinted up the field, was all alone, and kind of threw his hands up in like celebration, like he was going to be scoring an 80-yard touchdown. But I don't necessarily see the 49ers bringing in a wide receiver who's going to be, trying to get into the starting lineup. What I'm saying basically is if you bring in a wide receiver at this point, any of the names I mentioned, you have to pay them like the role that they envision. You have to pay them like a starter. And so where the 49ers are with their salary cap, they have plenty of cap space this year. Don't get me wrong. But the clearing of the roster or the salary cap in the offseason had a lot to do with not necessarily this year. It's just to get the books right for the future. It's to get the books right when big money or more big money kicks in for Brock Purdy, for Brandon Ayuk, Trent Williams, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Diamador Lenore. So just there naming all those names, you can see that the 49ers probably have as many big priced, big ticket items on their roster right now, even with the offseason purge, if you will, than just about any team in the NFL. And now it's about for them using that draft, 11 players, to kind of stack, not necessarily the bottom of the roster, but create some depth. And that I think dovetails nicely into the defensive line position. I don't see them going to try to get a Micah Parsons because of, again, what it would cost to acquire him in a trade and also making him the highest paid player in the NFL. Same situation with Trey Hendrickson. There's also Christian Wilkins, that name that's been tossed out there. The Vegas Raiders released him last week. I don't see that happening. This is a guy coming off a Jones fracture. I don't know what all happened in Las Vegas, but it sounded kind of weird. But anytime you have a big guy like that coming off a Jones fracture and hasn't healed necessarily properly, I think the 49ers stay away from that, especially with the injuries that they've incurred here over the past few seasons. And also, when you're looking at that position, 49ers have to develop their young defensive linemen. And we talked to 3 of those guys on Saturday. It was just kind of impressive to hear each of those guys. I think they are coming along. I've talked a lot about Alfred Collins, the 2nd-round draft pick from Texas. At 6'5", 332 pounds, he needed the offseason program. He didn't get it because of his calf. He's healthy now, and you can see he's working on his game. He's a long way from getting there. Will he be able to make a big contribution early in the season? That certainly remains to be seen. But 2 rookies right now who are ahead of him, quite clearly, Mykel Williams. Let's cut the bull. He's a starter week 1, no doubt about it. Can he be a 3-down player where he plays base down, sets the edge in the run game, 1st and 2nd down, and then slides inside and rushes the passer on 3rd downs? Also, CJ West, high motor, plays fast, talks fast. He's somebody the 49ers have reason to really like coming in the fourth round. Also, a guy who was compared quite favorably to DJ Jones, the former 49ers defensive tackle, who is now with the Denver Broncos. Well, guess what? CJ West has heard those comparisons. He hasn't just heard the comparisons since he became a member of the 49ers. He heard them even before that. And so DJ Jones, the Broncos, coming to Santa Clara. CJ West fully intends to, if it works out, to have some time with DJ Jones, introduce himself, and maybe talk shop with him. So I don't see the 49ers, going out and getting a starter caliber defensive lineman, a starter caliber wide receiver. I think they feel like they have enough pieces there in those spots that they're going to roll with what they have. I don't see them adding any players who will be significant contributors. Just like I said, I don't see any of the players that they've added since training camp started really making too much of a run for a roster spot. So all that could change, of course, with an injury here, an injury there, or if when those joint practices happen this coming week against the Broncos, the following week against the Raiders, maybe the 49ers see something that is concerning. But I think they have kind of a wide berth here of 49ers know that this team is a work in process or a work in progress. And they know that because of the young guys coming in, there's going to be some growing pains at a lot of different positions, but they made the commitment in the offseason to kind of write it out, to bring in young guys, develop them, and be a much better team later in the season. Go have those growing pains early on. They're willing to deal with, but they need those guys to get out there and play so that they can fully engage in that developing process. So that's kind of the rundown of how I see the 49ers roster right now. I always kind of say all the good players are taken this time of year. And yeah, there's a couple stragglers out there that could fit into an NFL team and help a team, but I just don't see the right fits right now for the 49ers. The 90 players you see on their roster are the 90 players I think you can expect to see with that team leading up to the final cuts, or at least I should say the initial cuts to 53 before the start of the regular season. So that's the quick rundown from 49ers land. Thanks for tuning in, and I might be back later in the day with some observations from the coaching staff. But until then, thanks for watching, and that is it for now.